Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is, and whatever part of the world you're at right now. Welcome back. And today we're going to be reviewing a geometry lesson about special right triangles. So we have two types of special right triangles, a 45, 90, and a 30, 60, 90. Okay. Now, these formulas, well, the rules that we're going to use for special right triangles are really just formulas, okay? So you really have to make sure that you remember the formulas and the concepts, behind each type of triangle. That way you can always apply it to any problem that you do. So what I like to do first is always start off by labeling the parts of a right triangle. For instance, the first part you should always label is the hypotenuse. Okay, the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle. Okay, so wherever the right angle is in a right triangle, the hypotenuse is the side opposite the right angle. Now on a 45, both of the legs are congruent. They're the same measure. Okay, and more specifically, because of that, the hypotenuse has a special formula. Okay, it's the leg and then the square root of 2. Okay, so let me erase that and write that again so there's no confusion. This is equal to whatever the measurement of the leg is times the square root of 2. All right, really simple. So now for the 30, 60, 90 triangle, okay, we remember the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, okay? And so with that being said, before we do any 30, 60, 90 triangles, let's do examples 17, 18, and 19 because all of those have to do with the 45 triangle, okay? So this is how you use the formula. For example, with number 17, every time you do a problem, start off by labeling the parts, okay? So this is H, that's the hypotenuse, okay? And then these other two parts are legs. Now, if the base leg is 6, then that means that vertical leg where X is labeled is also 6. So I know that X is equal to 6. And I know that the hypotenuse is whatever the leg is times the square root of 2. So our hypotenuse is 6 square root 2. And that's it. Okay. Let's take a look at number 18. Once again, start off by labeling your triangle. This is the hypotenuse. And that means that these two are legs. Okay. Now, the hypotenuse is always equal to a leg times the square root of 2. Okay. So what we're gonna have to do here for this expression, they told us what the hypotenuse was, right? Or what the hypotenuse is. And let me relabel this a little bit. So this is our hypotenuse, and we know that it's technically equal to a leg times the square root of 2 for a 45 triangle. So in order to do this work here, we simply have to do 14 the square root of 14 is equal to is equal to a leg times the square root of 2. Okay. Now, to simply solve for this, we just need to divide both sides by the square root of 2. Okay. And when we do that, we're going to find out that our leg is really just equal to the square root of 7, because the square root of 14 divided by the square root of 2 is the square root of 7. So both of these legs are square root 7. And that's what we write in the blank. Okay. So the thing to remember here is whatever parts they give you, label it first, and then you still may have to set it equal to a particular expression. All right. So let's take a look at number 19. First thing we want to do is label it, okay? So 30 is our hypotenuse. That means that x and y are the legs. Now, once again, we know that the hypotenuse is equal to a leg times the square root of 2. So in order to figure out what the leg is, we need to do 30 equals a leg times the square root of 2. Now, to undo this, we're simply just going to, once again, divide both sides by the square root of 2. Okay? So what we're going to end up with is L is equal to 30 divided by the square root of 2. Okay? However, in math, we're not allowed to leave an answer with the radical on the bottom. Okay? So what we're going to need to do is simplify it. Remember, we have L, the leg right now, we have it as 30 divided by the square root of 2. All right, to simplify, when you have a radical on the bottom, you simply need to multiply the top and the bottom by the radical. So this is the square root of 2. For example, what I mean by that is, if this was the square root of 9 or the square root of 19, then I would do the square root of 19 and the square root of 19. But since it's the square root of 2, okay, we're gonna be using the square root of 2. Now, the denominator, when you multiply a square root times itself, and what I'm referring to is right here, when you multiply a square root times itself, it equals the number underneath the radical. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. And then on the top, we're going to have 30 square root 2. Now, the last step here, we can simply just simplify this because we can divide the 30 and the 2. And that makes 15. And so the final part here is 15 square root 2. So we know that the leg is really equal to 15 square root 2. So our legs, once again, these answer choices here should be 15 square root 2 and 15 square root 2. Okay? All right, so that's for the 45-45 triangle, 45-45-90 triangle. Now we're going to do the 30-60-90. Now, once again, with the 30-60-90, we're going to start off by labeling our parts. We already labeled the hypotenuse. Now, with a 30-60-90 triangle, the legs are not congruent. So we have to identify them as short leg and the long leg. Now, the short leg, the hypotenuse and the long leg are both written in terms of, their formulas are in terms of the short leg. Like, for example, the hypotenuse is 2 times the short leg. The long leg is the short leg times the square root of 3. Okay, so if you know what the short leg is in a 30-60-90 triangle, then automatically you kind of know what the hypotenuse and the long leg is. Okay, so once again, when we do these, we're going to label the parts of the triangle first. So this is the hypotenuse because it's opposite the right angle. Obviously 12 is the short leg and X is the long leg. Okay, now since we have the short leg, we know that the hypotenuse is equal to 2 times the short leg. Well, the short leg is 12, so it's 2 times 12, which equals 24. So the hypotenuse, which is y, is equal to 24. Now, to figure out x, which is the long leg, remember the long leg is equal to the short leg times the square root of 3. Well, the short leg is 12, so it's 12 square root 3. And that's the answer we put right here, 12 square root 3. Okay? All right. Once again, let's take a look at number 21. And when you're doing 30, 60, 90 triangles, you will need to practice this enough for you to become proficient with it. So I would suggest you have the formulas available and practice. Don't just rely on what I'm showing you in the video. You may need to actually practice it a little bit more to make sure you get the concept. Number 21, let's go ahead and label the parts of the triangle. 16 is the hypotenuse, y is the short leg, and x is the long leg. Okay. Now, they didn't tell us what the short leg is. They did tell us what the hypotenuse is. And we know that the hypotenuse is equal to 2 times the short leg. So if I want to figure out what the short leg is, I have to do, basically we're going to be setting up 16 equals 2 times the short leg. And remember, the hypotenuse is what we already know. That's 16. So if I want to solve for the short leg, I simply divide both sides by 2. So the short leg is equal to 8. So y is equal to 8. Now that we know what the short leg is, we should be able to tell what the long leg is, okay? Remember, in order to find the long leg is equal to the short leg times the square root of 3. Well, the short leg is 8. So the long leg is 8 square root 3. Okay? All right. Number 22, the last one. First things first, start off by labeling the parts of the triangle. Hypotenuse, short leg, long leg. Okay? The part that they gave us was the long leg, and we know that the long leg is equal to the short leg times the square root of 3. So we're going to set up 21 is equal to the short leg times the square root of 3, because that's what the formula says for the long leg. Okay, remember, formula for the long leg is the short leg times the square root of 3. Now, with that being said, if I want to solve for the short leg, I just divide both sides by the square root of 3. Okay? So that's going to tell me that the short leg, well, we're going to have 21 divided by the square root of 3 is equal to the short leg. But remember, we can't leave things with a radical in the denominator, so we have to simplify again. Okay? So when we simplify, we're going to have 21 over the square root of 3. Then we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 3. And remember, when you multiply a radical times itself, it just equals the number underneath the radical. So square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. And then the top becomes 21 times the square root of 3. Okay? Our last step, obviously, is to simplify 21 divided by 3, which is 7. So this becomes 7 square root 3. All right? So our short leg is really equal to 7 square root 3. And in our diagram, our short leg is the x variable, okay? So x is equal to 7 square root 3. Now that we've established that, let's erase some of this stuff here, okay? Now we need to find the hypotenuse, okay? But we know that the hypotenuse is equal to 2 times the short leg. Well, we know that the short leg is 7 square root 3. So 2 times 7 square root 3. 2 times 7 is 14. So the hypotenuse is 14 square root 3. Okay? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you use your formulas for the 45, 45, 90 special right triangles and the formulas for your 30, 60, 90 special right triangles. Hopefully that cleared some things up and made this a little bit more achievable for my learners out there. Love you guys. Deuces. Come back for the next episode. See you later.